You're not ever going to want to buy a house with these features unless you're prepared to spend tens of thousands of dollars in repairs. Today, I'm going to break down some of the top things to look for when buying a house, and I'm going to tell you some real life stories that I have experienced firsthand. I'm also going to tell you what kind of problems that these things can cause if you miss them. We've got real stories, real money, and real situations that I've seen hundreds of times to buyers of all different types. Let's get into the video. First up is going to be homes with stucco. Stucco is literally going to be a moisture magnet. I was actually helping a client look for a home in the North Wales area, in the Downingtown area, and he was searching for that $1 million to $1.2 million price range. And these homes were, beautiful. Big, grand homes. You get double staircases, big floor plans, 4 or 5 bedrooms, Jack and Jill bathrooms. Overall, really great homes. But the biggest issue with literally 80 to 90% of these homes, $1 million plus homes, is that either the front of the home is completely stucco or completely brick, or the entire house is completely stucco. And when we got into it, I'm going to tell you some examples and some stories here. Just completely nightmare. We're lucky that we uncovered it before we wrote an offer, before we really got into spending money on inspections, because this could have been a very costly mistake had we missed it, had we not done the proper due diligence. Now, if you do know anything about stucco in this area, it's a complete nightmare. And I'm not just talking about, poor stucco jobs or poor stucco in, the 80s and 90s, because, there are documented claims from that all over Montgomery County, Bucks County, Chester County. But the real issue is going to be how the stucco reacts to our climate. We've got a very cold, wet, humid, unforgivable, sticky climate out there. And the moisture is going to build up behind the walls, mold is going to form right behind the stucco. In a lot of these houses, you're going to have wood, so that, unless you have stone behind the stucco, a lot of these houses are going to have wood beams, wood support framing behind the stucco. So when the moisture, the water gets in there, it gets stuck, you get mold, you get just major problems, wet stucco, just very large issues. One of the homes that we'd actually looked at was in Downingtown. It was priced at about 1.1 million. And it had a full stucco exterior, the front, the sides, the back, it completely were stucco. And they actually had a bid, that home was under contract, a buyer had gone in there and done an inspection, and they had gotten actually a bid from a stucco company saying that stucco is no good, it needed to completely be removed, and they had quoted us $100,000, I think it was like $98,000, to replace the entire house with siding, vinyl siding, and remove the stucco. That is a major repair, $100,000 just to do the stucco. It didn't even take into consideration if the windows were bad, if the flashings, if the seals, whatever it needed to be replaced. That was a massive repair. Even small stucco repairs can be $10,000 to $20,000, $30,000. And small, I mean just maybe the front or a part or a side of a house. They could be tens of thousands of dollars. And then obviously you've got the full remediation, the entire house, that could be $100,000, $200,000 plus. At the end of the day, my tip is going to be, if you are buying a stucco home, this buyer at this price point in these areas, stucco homes are very common. You're gonna probably see them 70 to 80% of the time, especially in a market that we're in right now where inventory is very limited. So my suggestion to you would be, if you are buying a stucco home, or if you're interested in a home that has stucco, do the proper due diligence, hire an inspector, get a stucco moisture reading company out there, do all the due diligence that you need to do to make sure that the stucco is in good condition. But ultimately, if you don't want to deal with this at all, even after owning the home and having that potential problem 10, 20, 30 years down the line, I would just say avoid stucco altogether. Don't look for homes that have stucco. Brick is usually a lot better. You've got brick fronts, stone fronts. Those typically tend to be a lot better than stucco. But if you want to be completely safe, look for vinyl, look for just anything other than that stucco front siding. Next up is going to be flood zones. This could be an insurance nightmare for, some buyers, and oftentimes they might miss it. Flood zones aren't just going to be for homes that are on a creek or on a river. You could literally be miles and miles away from the nearest body of water. Literally, flood zones in the desert exist. So you could be anywhere and still be designated into a FEMA flood zone, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means. So if your property is designated to be in a FEMA flood zone, essentially what it means is that you're gonna have to carry flood insurance. It's gonna be required by most lenders, even if the home has never flooded or never will flood. It's just gonna be a requirement that the lender puts onto the loan. And this cost can be anywhere from maybe $1,500 to $3,000 plus a year. The tricky part about flood zones is that it can change over time, especially after big storms. FEMA is going to update their maps to see where the flooding went, to see how the water drained. So a seller, they might have a low grandfathered premium, but when you go buy the home from them, if they reassessed, if they had kind of updated those maps, even if that had changed at all, you're going to probably be stuck paying that full market rate as opposed to what that seller had for the last 30 or 20 years. Here's a little story time of us dealing specifically with flood zones. We've dealt with it a ton of times, but one of my most recent times, found a perfect property, a row home just outside of the city. We had went and I pull, when you know, we go to write an offer, we look at a property, even initially. That's one of the things that we look for initially, just so that the lender has an idea, just so that you know the worst thing is going to a property, falling in love with it, and then finding out, oh, well, no, we can't afford this or whatever. So we had found a property, it was amazing. Before we looked at it, I went and I pulled all the information on it. I found that there was flood insurance, or it was in the flood zone. Flood insurance was going to be required. So before scheduling tours, before getting out and actually falling in love with the property, touching, feeling it, smelling it, I had sent it over to the lender. I said, hey, listen, what would the cost be on this property to get this flood insurance? You know, it was a pretty cost sensitive, budget sensitive situation. So my lender, Tyler, had ran the numbers, and essentially he had come back and said, hey guys, listen, like to carry flood insurance in this area on this property, it's going to be an additional like $2,400 a year. And that came out to about $200 a month. So when we added that, you know, the $200 plus the taxes, the insurance, the mortgage, it was not an option that was affordable anymore. So instead of wasting time and going to look at it and writing an offer and getting, you know, as far in as we could have gone with it, we were able to ex-nay that property right away. It took us about 3 hours. We said, hey, listen, this one's not going to work. Let's go back on the market. Let's find another property that's not in a flood zone or that's got a lower premium in a flood zone. And that's exactly what we did. We found them, I think a week later, we found them a perfect property. It had lower flood insurance, still in that same area, still, you know, walking, shopping to everything that it needed to do. It just didn't have that high cost of flood insurance. Here's what you can do on your own, just to prepare. Make sure that when you're looking at homes on Zillow, or even if you're out of the state and you just want to get an idea of the areas, you can use some of these free tools that I use all of the time. You're going to have the FEMA Flood Map Service Center. You're gonna plug in the address. It'll show you what the flood zone is. You know, you've got zone X, zone AE, VE. You're gonna have flood factor. That's gonna offer a detailed breakdown of current and future risk for any properties. It's gonna include how many floods have ever happened nearby and projections for the next 30 years. And then you're gonna have the PA flood risk tool. It's gonna give you more in-depth risk info across Pennsylvania. It's gonna be great for suburbs, Bucks County, Montgomery, Delaware, even Chester County as well. And here are just some tips that I tell my buyers when they're looking for properties. Even if a home isn't in the flood zone, if it's close to one, you should still ask if it's ever flooded, right? You wanna know about the basement, if they've got basements, whether it's a sump pump, water, from weather, whatever it is. You wanna know if the home is ever flooded. That should be in the seller property disclosures. You wanna know how the drainage and the grading around the property is. Not to get too far off the task, but I had another situation where we were looking at homes, we were touring homes, it was raining really, really bad. We were at the home and we saw that there was a ton of pooling next to the house, bad drainage, bad grading from, you know, whatever work was done. We had actually, while we were at the house, we'd taken pictures, we'd sent it to the listing agent, and we'd said, hey, listen, you know, we're stuck at the house, there's a ton of water right here. This is actually a house that we're considering, but with all of this, like, we're not gonna be able to offer you asking. We ended up, you know, a week or so later, 5 days later, some negotiation, we ended up getting that property for like $60,000 under asking, literally just for the fact because we were there, we saw the drainage, we saw the photos, there was really nothing that they could do about it other than just be like, you know what, you're right, we've got to get it fixed. So another great win there. So you could check the drainage, you could check around the property, you could check the gutters, the sump pumps, make sure they're in good shape. Right, you want to make sure the gutters are not crunched up and make sure that they're draining properly, they've got pipes or whatever it is coming off of the house. And then make sure that obviously the sump pump, everything's clean around that, it's working properly, pumping. You can even put a backup generator in there so you lose power, it continues to keep pumping water out. The last tip would be if you are in a newer subdivision. I know that I work with new builds all of the time. You're gonna wanna check for a stormwater basin, newer developments, especially if you're, you know, one of the first people to live in there. You're gonna have a lot of trial and error that is gonna come throughout, right? It's just freshly graded. You're gonna have very soft ground in this area. You're gonna have seeding, right, and hay to grow the grass. So definitely something that you're gonna wanna look out for when you move into a new build. Where is that water draining? And if you've got issues, I know that we had some issues on some properties that we had helped people get into. We actually reached back out to the builder and they had come out on their own dollar, on their own dime to fix the drainage because that's something that they're responsible for. And I mean, flood zone or not, insurance doesn't always cover groundwater seepage, drainage failure, over, whelm storm systems with too much water. So all very important stuff to keep in mind. Next up, we're gonna have polybutylene pipes. It's gonna be a quiet, just ticking time bomb. So if you're buying a home built between mid-70s, mid-90s, you're gonna wanna be aware of this. Polybutylene piping. It's gonna be a gray, flexible water line. It's gonna look harmless, but it's very bad. It could potentially be very, very bad. These pipes were just a cheaper alternative to copper back in the day, but over time they've just been known to fail without any type of warning, just completely burst. You get failures that happen behind the walls, under floors, in basements, whatever it is, and you're just gonna have major, major water damage until you find it, until it seeps through the mold, whatever it is. So a full repipe could be anywhere from $10 to maybe $20, $30,000 plus. It really depends on the complexity, the age, the style of the home. A lot of times, just so I don't forget to mention, a lot of times when they do repipe, it's typically easier to just rerun the whole house, rerun the whole piping for the entire house. They're not gonna rip out the poly. So it's possible that if they could have repiped and they might have left the poly in the wall, you would just wanna confirm that if the poly's in the wall, it's no longer being active, and that the new plumbing is the active plumbing. A lot of insurance companies won't even issue policies if they know that you've got poly pipes. I had a buyer before, fell in love with a home in East Norton. It looked great. We were doing the inspection, we went under the sink, we found those little gray lines coming out. So those are spots that you can find on hot water heaters, under sinks. It was coming out of the wall there. We saw that it was poly. We brought in a plumber and actually got permission from the seller to cut into the wall and to check it out. We did that. We confirmed it was poly throughout the majority of the house, at least from what we could see. And honestly, this was a point of negotiation. We ended up getting $15,000 back from the seller to replace the piping. That came in the form of a credit. So they ended up covering 15 grand of their closing costs. My buyer kept 15 grand in their pocket. And then after closing, that buyer was able to hire that contractor to go in there and repipe the entire house. So here's what to look for. It's gonna be a gray flexible tube. It's probably gonna be stamped PB2110, commonly found at the hot water heater, under the sinks, in unfinished basements, under the above the ceiling, under the floor. If the seller doesn't know what type of pipes are being used in the house, I would definitely recommend that you get it inspected. Next up is going to be external obsolescence. This is going to be a very interesting one that you probably don't even think about until you're selling. This is going to be a good story actually here. Not a good story, but a good story of an example for you. So past year, I had a client help her sell her home. It was a beautiful home, big, it was updated, it was in the mid 550 range, but it sat on the market for almost 10 months. It was literally at one point, it was the largest home for the cheapest price. It was the lowest price per square foot. It was literally the best deal in probably 5 to 10 miles. The reason it sat was because right next to the property, it was a water pump station for the neighborhood. It wasn't loud, it wasn't smelly, it was just, a water pump, but people did not like it. The house that we were selling, it had lower walls, it had a lower fenced wall, and you could see over the wall to that water pump. And I guess it was a bit of an eyesore. You ever go to that side of the house or whatever, you would always kind of see it. But really, it didn't make noise, it didn't spray water, it didn't do anything. In every showing, in every open house, every piece of feedback that we got, someone had said, hey, the wall is too low and I do not like the water pump next door. Seriously, every single person. The house ended up selling at a 20% discount from where we originally listed it at. And this was not in a buyer's market. This was in a strong seller's market. Properties, the right properties were getting sold in 3 or 4 days. So it was a very, very interesting story to be a part of. Ultimately, the lesson is going to be to pay attention to what's around the house. Do you have power lines? Do you have a highway? Do you have a fire department or a police department where people are going to be constantly leaving and going out? Commercial building, whatever it is, utility station. All of these are going to affect your resale value, no matter how nice the house is, no matter what area it's in. All of these are factors that are going to ultimately affect the next buyer. Next up is going to be HOAs with low reserves or HOAs in active litigation. This one's going to be just a complete deal killer that you might never see. First up, I'll say not all HOAs are going to be created equally. Your dream house, condo, townhouse, it could look amazing. It could be in an HOA that's got, maintained lawns, you got fresh paint, all of the common areas are, 5 stars, but what's going on behind the scenes and financially just could be a completely different story. I've seen this happen time and time again. And even when the seller, people in the community that are owners that own multiple properties, they're listing agents that work in these communities, 10, 20 properties a year, they had no idea that this was going on, and it ultimately killed the deal every single time. So here's what happened. We had a condo. It was beautiful, well-run community, expensive community. We literally had gotten through everything. We negotiated repairs, we got seller credits, inspections, they paid for inspections. We were a week away from closing. The buyers were actually, they had found us through YouTube, so they were out of town. They were doing this completely virtually. They were ordering furniture to the house. Like, I mean, we were literally getting ready to give them the keys and close on this property. About 3 days before closing, the lender had to pull out of the deal. And not just one lender. We had one lender had said, hey, listen, this I'm not gonna be able to do this. I can't do a loan in this community. We had sent it to 2 other lenders. So we had a total of 3 lenders. 3 lenders, 3 different companies, 3, hundreds of banks, because they were actually brokers. So they were sending this to hundreds of banks, and all the lenders essentially said the same thing. They could not issue a loan on the property because the property's cash, its ratios, it did not meet the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines to issue a loan in this community. So the HOA, it had low reserves, it had a high percentage of delinquent owners, the financial ratios didn't meet the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac lending guidelines, and just the loan could not be approved by 3 different lenders. Luckily, my client was financing, so we were able to back out, we recovered their earnest money deposit, we got a loan denial. But for anyone that was paying cash, this could have just been, a big issue. You might not have had that flexibility to back out, you might not even have uncovered it. I've had that in situations where I've had some buyers that were looking at communities. Luckily, I already knew about this community because I had some finance buyers in it, and I was able to tell these cash buyers, hey, listen, you don't want to buy in this because, hey, it's not going to pop up for you because you don't have a lender, you don't have anyone that's pulling these ratios and checking the behind the scenes in the HOA, but I know it because I just worked in it. This is not a community that you want to get involved in. It's very expensive. You're gonna have a $30,000 to $40,000 assessment, blah, 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 blah. So I went through all of that with them, but cash buyers, I mean, that's the scary part. You would have closed on the property, you would have gotten hit with a later, special assessment, unexpected fees are increasing, the risk of property value losing, getting lost, just a ton of issues that a cash buyer probably never would have seen coming. Here's what you can check. You've got HOA and reserve study. So you can ask them or check, are they putting money aside for long-term repairs? You could check the delinquency rate, right? So if too many owners aren't paying the dues, the lenders are gonna probably reject the building. You could check for any pending lawsuits. So that could take financing options. It could just signal bigger problems ahead. And then you could look for any upcoming capital projects. You got roof replacements, repaving of the streets, any exterior repairs, right? Stucco, siding, windows, HVAC, electrical, whatever it is. And here are some red flags that should just make you pause a little bit. So anything under reserves under 10% of the annual budget should maybe, look at that again. If you got a high number of rentals versus owner occupied units, that's another sign as well. Vague or just missing financials. So when you go in contract or when you reach out to the HOA, you can get a copy of their financial statements. Any mentioned or ongoing pending litigations, right? Lawsuits, anything like that you don't want to be a part of. Next up is going to be pretty quick. It's going to be bad remodels. We've talked about this all over the channel. Pretty cover-ups, just super hitting headaches. So you walk in, you've got brand new floors, you've got fresh paint, shiny kitchen. Behind the walls, right, it could be a completely different story. You're going to see this a lot, closer to the city, Norristown, Phoenixville maybe. Just places where you've got more developed living, right, that row home style, townhouse style. But, just in general, any flip at all, you definitely want to keep your eyes out. Here are some things to look out for. You want to look out for mismatched work, right? You want to make sure the cuts in the floors are nice, the trims are nice, they're not, doing lazy work, taking the easy way out. Cheap finishes, right? So check out the doorknobs, the sink fixtures, the handles on the doors, all of that. DIY level stuff, right? So look at the paint, how many coats are they doing? Is it very thin paint? How well, if they do shiplap or wall designs, how well is it attached? All of these different things could give you a good idea. I've seen flipped homes where they didn't even permit for electrical work. They used the cheapest material, flooring, paint, whatever. And then 6 months down the line, the house is falling apart. There's no warranties because they're not contractors, whatever it is, and just a whole mess that you get involved in. All right, I want to take a minute and pause the video right here. Let me know this far in the video, has there been anything that has been surprising to you that maybe you shouldn't look for in a home? I'm curious to know your thoughts. Comment down below. I'll pause it. All right, we're getting back into the video. Next up is going to be old HVAC system. You're going to get big bills, even maybe bigger headaches if it's hot and you're getting some heat exhaustion. But it's going to get hot, it's going to get humid out here in Philly in the suburbs. July, August, I mean, we're in the middle of it right now. It's 98 degrees out. You walk outside at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and just dripping sweat already. So the last thing that you're going to want to do is move into your dream home, you're bringing in boxes, you're cleaning, whatever, and then you find out the air conditioning is barely pushing air. And here's the thing, just HVACs are weird, right? Just because it's working during your showing, just because it's working even during the inspection, it doesn't mean it's working properly, it's gonna be working long. Here are some things to look out for and how to prevent an old AC unit going bad. Of course, you need to know how old it is, how efficiently it runs, how well it was maintained. These are all questions and answers that you can get during the inspection period. The age, efficiency, all of that could be done by a HVAC technician. The maintenance as well, they could tell how many services it is. You can even ask the seller if they've got a record of maybe services on the unit. Real world example, we're under contract on a $600,000 home. I think it was Lower Gwinnett. Everything looked great. You had new roof, you had new HVAC, finished basement, everything, updated kitchen. The general home inspector had flagged that the AC is blowing air, but it wasn't cooling fast enough. The ratios weren't where they needed to be. Right, because the general home inspector, he'll look at everything, he'll call it out, but he's not gonna make a formal bid. So he called it out, we brought in a HVAC technician, they came out, gave us a second opinion. It turns out the unit was 16 years old, it was leaking coolant, refrigerant, and it was just not holding the temperature. So a full replacement was needed. I think he quoted us about like $9,200. The nice part is that since we did the proper due diligence, we were in the inspection period, we were able to actually negotiate a 50-50 split with the seller. They paid about $4,600. My buyer used one of my preferred vendors, so he actually ended up cutting him a little bit of the deal. That's the other nice thing, is that because I use my guys so much and we do so much work, when I've got a buyer that needs an HVAC, when I've got a buyer that needs a hot water heater, whatever it is, I tend to get favored pricing because I use these guys so much. I'm giving them so much work. They're gonna be a little bit more favorable to me in pricing, helping my buyers, get an HVAC system for a little bit cheaper than they would find on their own. So that's another great asset of having a local real estate agent, a local professional that's got that network, that's got that team of people around that can help you make that move 1,000 times easier. So essentially, we agreed to a 50-50 split. The seller covered half, my buyer was okay covering half. I think the HVAC guy had cut the buyer a little bit of a deal, so I think they came in with like, $3,000 or so. So we got an amazing deal on the HVAC. They ended up closing on the home, getting it installed, walked away with a brand new home. So they had a brand new roof, brand new HVAC, brand new AC, updated kitchen, everything was to the nines on this home. And my buyers were super, super happy. Most buyers would have probably missed this. They would have just assumed, oh, it's pushing air, it's good, or they would have paid for it themselves at closing, said, oh, I don't want to inconvenience them, I don't want to hold it up. The truth is, I love negotiation. I'm going to treat your money like it's mine. So whether it's an HVAC, it's negotiating a seller credit, an asking price, whatever it is, I love the negotiation aspect. But the other piece of this is that I built relationships with HVAC vendors and pavers and landscapers and all of these people since I've lived here my entire life. They're going to pick up the phone for me. They're going to take care of my clients, my buyers, my sellers. So that type of value, just having those resources, just having that network of people is gonna make the difference every single time. The bottom line is just gonna be always to check the age of these systems. 10 plus years, you're really gonna wanna focus in on it, probably getting towards the end of its life. You're gonna wanna get maintenance records, right? Any system updates or anything like that that they've done over the years. Look for those uneven temps, those uneven ratios during your inspection period with your inspector, and then always get an HVAC inspection if something feels off, right? If the unit is old, if it's blowing lower air, even if it's making a sound, it's about $100. It's gonna save you tens of thousands of dollars down the line. And don't be afraid to negotiate that replacement. Even if you can get 50%, 25%, it's gonna be a lot more helpful than paying 100% down the line. Next up, we're gonna have sewer lines. This could be a major, major problem. This or the stucco is probably one of the most expensive repairs that we've had to come across. It's actually one of the most expensive repairs that buyers never see coming because it's underground. A lot of people don't even think to look, but this could be tens of thousands of dollars. So if you are buying an older home, a property where the sewer lines have to travel a long distance to the street from the home, a sewer scope to me is gonna be non-negotiable. Seriously, it's gonna be 150 bucks. It's gonna be the best 150 bucks that you could probably ever spend. It'll save you from a complete financial disaster. Here's what happened to one of my buyers. We were under contract on a $1 million home. I think it was Villanova. It was beautiful inside. It was renovated top to bottom, but it had a very, very long driveway. Very long, not a mile, but maybe a half a mile, quarter of a mile. It was a very, very long driveway back to the home. I said, hey, listen, we need to get a sewer inspection. This is a very, very long line. God forbid anything goes wrong. This could be very expensive to repair. It was over 100 feet from the main line. They ended up doing the sewer. They saw that it was an original clay sewer line. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that that is just as bad as some of these other stucco and other issues. So on that, they paid the 150 bucks, they got the sewer inspection. So about 70 feet out, the plumber actually found a crack in the pipe, a root intrusion or whatever it was. They ended up quoting us about $40,000 to go out and fix this. The actual other important piece of that is that this same company that found it was actually out a year prior to reassess it, right? So they were out there a year prior, they tried to do something to fix it, a chain knocker where it kind of goes down and flattens the pipe back out. They did that about a year ago, and they came back out and they said, hey, that didn't work. I would recommend a replacement, $40,000. We were still in the inspection period. We were able to negotiate that, and ultimately, I think they ended up splitting that 75-25. My buyer paid 25%. The seller ended up dropping about that 75% on the price, and they were able to get that repair done during or after closing. I mean, I would always do a sewer scope. It's 150 bucks, maybe 200 bucks. They take 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and they're gonna show cracks, they're gonna show sagging pipes, they're gonna show drainage, whatever it is, clogged pipes, whatever it is, they're gonna figure it out, and it's gonna save you tens of thousands of dollars from potentially having to flush that money down. Let's just recap the 8 things that you do not want to ignore when you're buying a home. So it's gonna be stucco, it's gonna be flood zones, poly pipes, that external obsolescence, weak HOAs, bad remodels, and old HVAC. Last but not least is gonna be the sewer lines. Each one of these repairs could be tens of thousands of dollars. They could even kill the deal. But if you know what to look for, you know what to avoid, you're gonna walk into that next home with complete confidence. If you are thinking about buying a home and you want someone who knows what to look for and how to protect your money, I would love to help. You can reach out to me. I'll put my information up here on the screen out of ease of convenience. Text, call, email. I'd actually prefer to get on a Zoom call using this link right here. It's in the description. We can meet face to face and just talk about your long-term or short-term real estate goals. If you found this video helpful, hit that like and subscribe button and drop a comment down below. What red flags have you seen when house hunting? Has there been anything that I missed on this list? I've been doing this for 4 years now, and these were some of the biggest issues that I found, helping over hundreds of families in all different positions. If you are thinking about making a move to this area, reach out to me, text, call, even schedule a free Zoom consultation. Until next time, I will see you around the neighborhood.